The intent or capability lens on, you described finance very eloquently. Did you see that was an intent challenge or a capability challenge? Is that something?
Oh, I think that I think there is very much, it ends up as a capability challenge, that the intentions are right, you know, and all the sort of nice presentations and all the principles, they're all in place. And then that capability challenge is just huge. And it's a numbers question, it's a planning question. And so often, when it gets to that capability piece, instead of being given to somebody who manages projects and has got real experience, it gets given to somebody who, you know, is brought in from another part of the industry or that company or whatever for the purpose. So they forget that that capability that is needed to manage a big project is a speciality in its own right. And they assume that, you know, somebody internally can do it. So I think it's the capability piece. And I very much enjoyed the points that you're making about, you know, the capability challenge when it comes to smart. Because there, I think it's a huge challenge. People don't know about it.
Yes.
We've got to get the things installed against timetables which are quite short, specifications which have not yet been decided by government. And you gave us some options, but I think you forgot the last option of how energy companies could consider that challenge. And one is they say, right, we're going to be generators. So instead of being and suppliers or suppliers, they say we're going to be generators. And therefore the supply is done by somebody who is a classic, you know, interaction with customers. So I think there's more than one option. We'll see what happens.
I think it's a very interesting conclusion. What are your reflections, Joe? Does that model work for you in terms of intent versus capability, or perhaps perspectives across your other cross-sector clients?
I think generally, nobody goes to work not to deliver a good experience. Generally most of us are driven by doing the best that we possibly can. And this split between intention and capability, we're talking about execution, effectively. And the big thing, if you go back to the Institute's research and the bits that I didn't cover off in terms of what's the future, really, Richard, some of the big things that are coming out about the future is about capability and skills base. And when we talk about that, you know, I guess my point from the customer point of view is often we think about the customer just being that last bit of that kind of delivery. And if you look at where those complaints and all of those issues about, they're not about price per se. They're about, are the people that I'm talking to knowledgeable? Do they have the power to make the right judgment decisions? Are they supportive? Do they have the knowledge? Now, those are things which are in our gift now, let alone planning for where we're going to be in 2020. But the big things for 2020 for me, looking at what that's going to look like, that is about trust. That is about really understanding and profiling our customers. So there's a whole new world there in terms of what those customers actually look like. And there's a big piece for me around capability and building that.
But if I draw from that conclusion that the intent is there but the execution is not, we are well-intentioned incompetents as an industry. I mean, that's the conclusion that we end up, that the failures where people see us fail, you know, you sent my bill inaccurately because you wanted to take money from me, is not true. It was an accurate read that went through the processes that perhaps was an exception. It puts us in that uncomfortable position of, if our intent is good but our execution is weak, is that acceptable? Is that really fulfilling the trust agenda?
No, but I think that's what we're saying, Richard. I think everybody in this room, you know, if you looked at the UK CSI, it has improved. There is some distance to go. I think everybody in this room will understand their own particular kind of challenges in terms of it. But I guess what I'm trying to get across is that expectation has also shifted.
Okay.
So now, as consumers and customers, we don't compare a utility sector with another utility provider. We compare with Waitrose or John Lewis or any of those sorts of things. So it's not about, you know, are we, from my point, incompetent? There are many great people that work in this sector and are driving and doing some really good things. The issue is about speed of change, the balance of powers change. As consumers, we are more demanding. That isn't going to stop. We need to pick up our game in terms of responding to that.
Okay. So it's interesting when you think about the trust agenda, and I didn't actually see the first set of presentations on the day one, but I know trust has been quite a significant part of it, and I don't know what everyone else feels, but the first time that someone says trust me My immediate response is to do the opposite. But it seems the trust agenda is quite closely linked to this execution. Is there a microphone? Producers, conferences? So we have two people at the back with questions. If I can remind you that we've had 3 presentations from a range of perspectives. Questions? I'm not going to let you off the hook. Someone is going to ask a question. See? I knew it was true.
Thanks. Steve Everett, Capita. So there's been a lot of focus on this, the concept of educating people about how difficult it is to provide energy, and therefore they place some more value in it. Personally, I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't think it's very difficult for Amazon to send me things from a warehouse via Royal Mail, but I don't question the margins they make. There's also been a lot of focus on kind of hygiene factors like billing. I personally, again, I'm not convinced that fixing billing is anything more than just getting you a step up the chain, as you say, getting the basics right. Yesterday, there was a really good presentation from Ian Peters, British Gas, who talked actually about the way to build trust, about essentially providing information, giving customers the information they needed to be in control of their own destiny. And I think that resonates much more with me in terms of the way forward. It may be a bit counterintuitive, but enabling customers to make their own decisions, to reduce their own costs and make the right choices seems to me actually the route to go in terms of building trust. And I'm kind of keen for views on what form that should take and what the best approach is for the energy industry to kind of go down that path.
It's almost a suggestion that information gives you control, but giving others intent is...
Which it does. I mean, actually, I'll just take issue with perhaps the first part of your question. I don't think it is wrong to explain to people about energy. I don't think it is wrong to tell them about their bill and how it's made up. I think it's right to do that. It is not an end in itself, but it is part of the steps that need to be taken. It's part of a demystifying, it's part of a simplifying, and it's part of actually providing a base of information so that there is a better understanding between customer and energy supplier. But I think you're right that in the end, what is going to be the critical piece is the customer has the information available, they have the tools available to do what they want, they can do what they want, and then if they come back to you and said, and I'm going to do it with you, I'm going to buy it off you, you know you've got there. But it's easy, if I may say, to lose trust. It takes a long time to rebuild it. And whilst I rather agree with your point, Richard, that if somebody says, trust me, it sort of it feels a bit like the spiv, doesn't it, you know? Nevertheless, trust is the issue, and if we try and call it something else, we'll be wrong. So it is and it's a long process with a lot of steps, and different things will be important for different people. And as an industry, we can't row away from it. We've just got to take exactly what is said to us and try our best to implement it in the best interest of our customers. And that is enlightened self-interest, because that is in the interest of the company as well.
Good, do you want to use?
I very much agree with what you said. And when you ask the customers what they really want, it comes down to 3 things. One is fairness, and that's about the price.
Yeah.
The other one is transparency. They want to see this black box a little bit more to understand it a bit better. And third one is empowerment. So coming back to your decision making, and we need to treat our customers like adults. We need to give them the tools and the information so that they believe they have made their own decisions about what they want to do. And if you look at those 3 things and the opportunities that we've got, we talk about digital for that reason. Because if you provide that information online or mobile or in whatever form you can do, and digital provides that platform for you, then you give empowerment to people. And that's what PowerShop did. Smart metering is going to provide a bit more transparency about our consumptions, etc. Fairness is an interesting topic, but we should question or challenge ourselves for being able to do things like, if one of our customers comes to us and says, for the last 2 years, I was on the wrong tariff and you've been charging me more, are you going to retrospectively go back and get that money back to me? Are we happy to do that?
Good point.
Okay, and for me, getting the basics right absolutely is critical. Going forward, what you're talking about in terms of empowerment of the consumer, that's what I was really talking about in terms of co-creation and the opportunity to bring the consumer or the customer inside the organisation. I have a good friend who's CEO a big organisation, and 10 years ago he said to me, I'm going to employ customers. And I said, I'm not talking about mystery shopping, I'm talking about actually having somebody that I pay to go through my customer experience. And that's in terms of thinking, our actual thinking needs to change in terms of outside in. And as consumers, as I was saying, there's a whole host of things I think in this industry sector that we can get involvement in, get idea generation from, great opportunities to do that. But even within the utility sectors across the board, not in every case, we're not doing the basics right. And there is a genuine desire to get the basics right, I think, which is the other bit that I would say.
Another question here?
Nick Clark from Tesella. I'm not sure if this is just trying to be a bit too kind of obvious and simplistic about it, but from what I can see, both banking and utilities have been guilty of mis-selling in kind of the fairly recent past in terms of switching and tariffs. Isn't it just a matter of time that you've got to spend keeping your nose clean in the way if you're comparing with Waitrose, for example, who doesn't have that image? Isn't it just a matter of time that you've got to keep your nose clean in order to get that trust back?
Is it just a matter of time?
Well, time is important. You're absolutely right that you have to you have to behave well. You have to do it right. Use Joe's expression: get the basics right. Not do something that may be interpreted in a different way. That it's not just mis-selling. It's that people think, well, they shouldn't have done that. You've got to be absolutely straight, absolutely clean, and you've got to carry on doing that. Yes, that is a hugely important part, but it's not the only thing. There's got to be more on top. You've got to be able to change. You've got to be prepared to, going back to the earlier question, provide that information, provide the tools, empower people as well. So it's quite a lot all to do at the same time. And I did say earlier, actually, and I'll just come back to it in a moment, if I may, in my presentation, that regulation can get in the way. And the example in the financial world of regulation getting in the way is that regulation actually requires the company, irrespective of who they may be in the financial services industry, to respond and solve a problem within a very short period of time. You can't. So you may be able to do it when it's simple, but people are more complicated than that. So what that ends up is sort of a bog standard response and a bog standard, I can either do that or I can't do that. And that is not helpful. And I think sometimes whilst that regulation was there to put pressure on the company to respond quickly to their customer, which is quite right. If it's there and says you've got to solve it quickly, and that means you've got to go back to the customer and have a talk within a short period of time, it doesn't work. And I do hope that some of those things which looked a good idea at the financial services industry but didn't work, don't suddenly find themselves imported into the energy industry, because that has the ability to put more of a wedge between the company and its customer when a problem arises, rather than what needs to happen, and that is that the company is able to get closer to the customer and solve it in the way that suits the customer.
Interesting your point as well about regulation getting in the way between customers. If you only have 4 products to choose from, the empowerment and the amount of choice you might get might be a bit less as
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do your electric cars. You're going to have trouble with really utilising the benefits of smart meters if you've only got 4 tariffs. I see that as a sort of interim measure. It's where we are now, and it is actually there because the tariffs got too complicated and the industry didn't grasp that early enough and sort it out themselves. I have to say that the rules and requirements aren't in there yet, but go onto the websites and you'll see they've actually done it now. But it is an interim measure, and as we get more sophisticated, because the tools are given to the customer, so we're going to have to get back into that tariff discussion and give a bit more plurality.
Can I just build on that? And maybe a bit controversial to say that, but in 2 years' time, when we come into this room to talk about this topic, we will either talk about our lessons learned from how we really couldn't do smart metering right, or we will talk about how utilities has been really good and can be a good best practice for the rest of the world, how to get it right. Now we have a choice. Yes, we can leave it to be the lessons learned conversation, or we can build the capability up front so we make it a success story. And there is that difference between that's going to make the timing element of when to when to act is going to be important.
Thank you. Joe?
I think the only thing I would say over time and trust is that I'm sure there's quite a lot of organisations in the retail sector that are no longer with us. And I think there's some big issues for me around time is a really interesting thing. The consumer, the pace of change in the last 3 years, the pace and the movement to the power of the consumer, the choice of the consumer, the swapping, is a fundamentally different field. So for me, absolutely, you've got to have trust and you've got to keep delivering that consistently, day after day after day. But there is also an issue for me about not just being okay, but being exceptional. And go back to the UK, 74% of GDP in the UK is service orientated. I want the UK to be known and renowned for the service that it gives. And we've got great organisations in this room and across the UK that actually can do that.
Something that particularly struck me when the Tesco horse meat stuff happened. And there was an advert in the paper that provided information about how it happened and what they're going to do about it. And I was reading the Metro, as one does, clearly having finished the FT. And that day. But it struck me, do you think any of the utilities now would have responded to a crisis in the same way? Been caught mis-selling, been taken to court for mis-selling. We'd failed to hit a compliance requirement in terms of energy obligations that were stated in that way. Sufficient headlines. It was really surprising how it does strike me that other sectors have learnt the art's the wrong word, using a crisis to change how you're perceived in terms of engagement.
I think that's a very good point. The other one was Starbucks, because Starbucks was pilloried for not paying tax or sufficient tax. That was the perception in this country. The reality, I don't know, for all I know, Ernst Young actually audits Starbucks.
And if we did, I'm sure we wouldn't have an opinion.
I won't go any further down that line. But I don't start a day without going for my Starbucks. I just have to have my skinny cappuccino. And the first thing that happened after they hit that problem was there was a pile of letters on the counter at Starbucks with a sorry, it's from Starbucks, managing director, UK, whatever it was, and it said, sorry, this is not our intention, this is what we want to be. And those letters were there for a long time, and you were always encouraged as a customer to pick up that letter, pick up the sorry letter. And I thought that was actually rather good, because that was quick to market. Here's the issue, what can we do about it? Well, there's some things which will take some time, but at least we can do an explanation to our customer. So you say that the horse meat, which we've probably been eating for years and never knew it was there, in fact, apparently the demand's up for horse burgers now. However, you're correct.
It's the end of the season.
Yeah, it's the end of the season for horse burgers. We've got these full-page advertisements. That was quick stuff. I thought that was good.
Lovely disclosure, honestly. Now I'm going to suggest we draw it to a close. If there's one more question.
Jeremy Downer, Sutton and East Surrey Water. I think the other dimension we're talking about here is communication. And maybe we're getting the trust we deserve at the moment because we're not communicating properly. Yeah. I don't believe that the issue of price is something to take out of this. I think Angela said it. We've got to communicate it to our customers. Profit is not the dirty word. We've just got to be open about it and communicate with it. In the water industry, we're going to go through a price review process next year. Price will be on the agenda big time, and I'm sure for the energy industry as well. In the water industry, leakage is another issue that we've got to communicate. It's an issue that is negative as far as our customers are concerned. We've got to communicate that to them. And the same issue will occur with smart if we don't communicate that as well. And that's the important thing we need to do up front. I think you're all saying that, but I think that's the issue that we all need to face.
And I couldn't agree more. If you look at the organisations that are performing well in the utility sector, they do communicate, they do engage, they are asking for opinion, it is about co-creation, it is all of those sorts of kind of things. And what is more, for me, really kind of impressive, the last points that I would say about customer service, which for me encapsulates trust, but it's wider, because it's all of those sorts of kind of elements, is that those organisations that keep their promises, communicate well, if something goes wrong, actually say that it's gone wrong and explain why it's gone wrong, will be the ones that are relentlessly looking at getting the basics right and more will be the ones that will be here in the future.
So with that, an exhortation to communicate more, I'm going to draw this communication to an end. So could you show a round of applause for our panellists? Thank you very much.